3 federal agencies would invest over $500 million, 510 to be exact, $510 million to produce a new generation of military and commercial transportation fuels. And this would be so directed toward biofuels. So over the next 3 years, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Energy, and the United States Navy will partner with private industry to reduce our nation's reliance on foreign oil, which too often comes from unstable regions throughout the world. Here to tell us about this mission is the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, former governor of Mississippi and a Navy veteran himself. Secretary Mabus is former ambassador to Saudi Arabia under President Clinton, and more recently was chosen by President Obama to prepare a long-term recovery plan for the Gulf of Mexico in the aftermath of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. So he has seen firsthand why it's so important that the United States change its view on the way we use energy, and oil in particular. Secretary Mabus has been a stunningly vibrant and important leader to the United States Navy. Almost 1 million men and women he is in charge of. By 2020, Secretary Mabus believes the Department of Navy can increase the percentage of alternative energy. It uses up to 50% from just 17% in 2009. That's a 10-year period. Our nation's armed forces, including the Navy and Marine Corps, are the best in the world, both at keeping us safe and keeping the peace. I'm glad to see them turn that determined spirit to the vital goal of transitioning the United States military to clean, renewable fuels. The person leading that is our guest today, Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Majority Leader Harry Reid, for your introduction, and more than that, for your leadership on the issues of energy independence and energy security, and for hosting this conference that's brought together some of the best thinkers, some of the most talented people in the area. I also want to thank John Podesta and the Center for American Progress for fostering the debate on energy policy, for giving us really thoughtful analysis and close examination of the challenges we face as a country. You know, people wonder, I think, all right, why the Navy? Why the Navy and Marine Corps? Why the interest in alternative energy? Why should our military be concerned about this? The answer is pretty straightforward. We buy too much fossil fuels from potentially or actually volatile places on Earth. The Vice President said it this morning. We buy our energy from people who may not be our friends. We would never let the countries that we buy energy from build our ships or our aircraft or our ground vehicles, but we give them a say on whether those ships sail, whether those aircraft fly, whether those ground vehicles operate, because we buy their energy. There are great strategic reasons for moving away from fossil fuels. The main one is the one I just said, where we buy these supplies of fossil fuels. There's also the matter of price shock and supply shock. Every time the cost of a barrel of oil goes up $1, it costs the United States Navy $31 million in extra fuel cost. When the Libya crisis began and the price of oil went up, the Navy faced a fuel bill increase of over $1.5 billion. There are really sound tactical reasons too. Just think of the difficulty of getting a gallon of gasoline to a Marine frontline unit in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. You have to take that gallon of gasoline across one ocean, either the Atlantic or the Pacific, then you take it overland either north through Pakistan or south through the Northern Distribution Network by convoy, and then either across the Hindu Kush mountain range or across the Amandara River until you reach that forward operating base. And it's costly, but it's costly in more ways than just money. We import gasoline more than anything else, gasoline and water more than anything else into Afghanistan. For every 50 convoys of gasoline that we bring in, we lose a Marine. We lose a Marine killed or wounded. That is too high a price to pay for fuel. So because of those reasons, because of those compelling strategic and tactical reasons, because it is frankly a vulnerability for our military, when you're a military force, you look at vulnerabilities of your actual or potential adversaries. But you better look at your own vulnerabilities as well. And one of our most glaring vulnerabilities is how we get and how we use energy. And it's a vulnerability we have to address. And so because of that, 2 years ago, soon after I became secretary, I came up with 5 goals for the Navy and Marine Corps in terms of energy. The broadest one of which is what Senator Reid talked about, that by no later than 2020, the Navy and Marine Corps, both afloat and ashore, will produce at least half of its energy from non-fossil fuel sources. We are making a lot of progress on that in the last 2 years. We've done a lot. We are in the process of testing and certifying all our aircraft and surface ships on biofuels. The F-18 Hornet, we flew one of these on biofuels over a year ago, the Green Hornet. It went, I think they made a movie about that maybe. The Green Hornet went 1.7 times the speed of sound on a mixture of camelina and aviation gas, and it didn't notice the difference. 2 weeks ago, we certified the Marine V-22 Osprey, the tilt-rotor aircraft, on biofuels. Last week, the T-45 trainer, and by the end of the fall, we will have certified every single aircraft that the Navy and Marine Corps fly. We're doing the same thing on our surface ships. Next weekend, Labor Day weekend, the Navy's Blue Angels, you know, the most incredible flying outfit you can ever see, will be doing their show at Patuxent River, Maryland, at the Patuxent River Naval Air Station. And for the first time ever, that entire group, the Blue Angels, are going to fly on biofuels, on a mixture of biofuels and avgas. We're doing other things. I talked about the Marines and their concern about losing Marines and about taking Marines away from what Marines were sent to Afghanistan to do, which is to fight, to engage, to rebuild, not to guard fuel convoys, not to guard replenishment convoys. So last year, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines were given a lot of alternative energy devices before they went to theater. Now, they weren't given a whole lot of training on it. They were simply given the devices. And 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines went to Sangin, which at that time was some of the hottest, heaviest fighting in Afghanistan. Now, in the middle of that fight, those Marines reduced their fossil fuel usage everywhere from 25% at their command headquarters to up to 90% at some of the forward operating bases and combat outposts which are closest to the fight. They did it by using things like portable solar. They did it by things like solar blankets that they were issued. These are flexible solar panels. You stick it in your pack. and you use it to power batteries for radios or GPS. In the mid-90s, a marine company carried 14 radios. Today, that same marine company carries more than 120. Doesn't count the other electronics. And they have to carry the batteries that go along with it. By relying on these solar panels, these solar blankets, those Marines saved almost 700 pounds of batteries per company that they didn't have to haul, and they didn't have to be resupplied every 2 days with batteries. The Marines have also taken in solar-powered water purifiers, making energy where you are, expeditionary energy. And the Marines, being Marines, have embraced this more enthusiastically than anybody else in our military. And they are making a difference. And today, every Marine unit about to be deployed to theater, part of their training, embedded in their training, is training on how to use alternative energy sources so that we can take convoys off the roads, so that we can take Marines off convoy guard duty. As Senator Reid mentioned, last spring, President Obama, the Commander-in-Chief of the American military, tasked 3 departments, Agriculture, Energy, and the Department of the Navy, to come up with a nationwide, geographically dispersed, advanced, drop-in, competitive biofuel industry. 2 weeks ago, on August 16th, the President announced that our 3 agencies had come together with a memorandum of understanding, and that we had a plan to spend $510 million, up to $510 million, in coordination with private industry to make this a reality. We're using the Defense Production Act, which has been on the books now since 1950 and has been used many times. And what it says is, if there is an industry that is vital to national defense that does not exist today in this country, then the Department of Defense can help start that industry, working with the private sector, with private finance, private industry, on at least a one-to-one financial basis to start up that industry. And that's what we're doing with biofuels. And today, Secretary Steve Chu of Energy, who spoke here earlier this morning, Secretary Tom Vilsack from Agriculture, and I announced that we've released the request for information to industry. In the next 30 days, we want industry to tell us what kind of technology they see as available. What sort of financial resources are they willing to put in? The financial sector, the agricultural sector, the industrial sector, willing to put in to this effort. Where do they think these facilities should be located? How, in the overall scheme of things, will this fit in? We're going to make this a competitive industry, competitive in price, competitive in supply. And the one thing extra that the Navy brings is we bring a market. To flip the line from Field of Dreams, if the Navy comes, they will build it. Department of Defense uses more energy than any other single entity in the United States. The Department of Defense uses 90% of all energy that the federal government uses, fossil fuel energy. And that's nearly 2% of all the energy that America uses. We have the market, and we are willing, if industry can make the biofuels that we need with the characteristics that we need, we're willing to sign offtake agreements and be that market, create that market, be that initial market, so then it can spread. And the military has done this over and over again. You look at the internet, you look at GPS, you look at flat screen TVs. The military has led, and then the civilian market catches up with it. Biofuels will be an important part of what we do as we transition away from fossil fuels in the Navy and Marine Corps, but it's only one part. We're looking at all sorts of other technologies. While we are a seagoing service, and while the Navy and Marine Corps are the most formidable expeditionary fighting force the world has ever known, we also have a few land facilities too. The Navy and Marine Corps have 3.3 million acres of land, 72,500 buildings. We have tripled our solar in the last year. This year, we're on track to double that again. By the time we have built out the solar power that we have on the drawing boards today, we'll have enough power to power a city the size of Norfolk, Virginia. But we're also looking at wind power, at geothermal, at hydrothermal, at wave, at anything that will produce homegrown, renewable, alternative energy for use by the Navy and Marine Corps. We have some requirements. One is that any sort of fuel, whether it's biofuel or anything else, has to be drop-in. We've got most of the ships we're going to have in 2020. We've got most of the aircraft we're going to have in 2020. We're not going to go and change the engines. The fuel has got to work on the engines and the equipment that we've got today. Second, it's got to be made in America. We are not going to trade one form of foreign energy for another form of foreign energy. Third, it should not take food out of production. It should and industry, and a lot of the people in this room here, we already know how to do that. Second and third generation cellulosic biofuels from algae, from waste, from landfills that Marines are already doing at Camp Pendleton and at Albany, Georgia. But we're moving in a lot of different areas. Today, we're the first service to be able to lead silver standards. In fiscal year 12, which starts in a month, every single building we build is going to have a gold lead option. And in FY13, every building that we build will be mandated to be gold lead. And we're doing this absolutely inside the current budget. The gold lead will not cost a single penny more than the way we're building buildings today. We have the first platinum lead building at Camp Pendleton, the Wounded Warrior Center for our wounded Marines. We are doing things like China Lake, the naval base here in California, the Naval Air Station, which through geothermal energy, is now producing more energy than it uses. We're giving energy back to the grid. And by 2020, at least half of all our land bases will be at net zero and will pull no energy off the grid. For all the alternative energies that we're looking at, we also have to look at efficiencies too. We've got to do the same mission, just use less energy to do it. And we're looking at that in a lot of ways. We're doing stuff like putting smart meters on all our bases so that we know where energy is used. I went to a naval base about a year ago now. And one thing that's sort of interesting, when I first became secretary, I'd go to a base or to a ship or to a marine installation, and my briefings would be good, but they'd be all over the board. Today, when I go, the first thing they want to talk about is energy. At this particular naval base, the CO said, I knew you were coming, so I got a copy of my energy bill, my electric bill. Just wanted to see how much I was spending. And he showed it to me. It's pretty simple. It's a big base. It had a couple of lines about where things were going and specific uses of energy, and then it had 85% line loss. 85% of the energy was going onto that base, and we didn't know where it was being used. We didn't know which buildings were the most efficient. We didn't know which activities were the most efficient. We didn't know anything about it. But now, because we've got smart meters on every single building, every single facility that we have, we do know. We do know when our peaks are. We do know who's doing a good job, who's not. We do know how we can improve. We're doing some other things. We've launched the first hybrid ship, the USS Macon Island. The Macon Island was built in my home state of Mississippi, in Pascagoula. It's a big deck amphibious ship. It's one of the biggest ships we have. And instead of just a normal drive, it has an auxiliary drive that's electric, that drives the ship at speeds of under 12 knots. On its maiden voyage from Pascagoula around South America to San Diego, where it's going to be home ported, at then fuel cost, and fuel was a lot cheaper a year ago than it is today, at then fuel cost, it saved almost $2 million on that first voyage. Over the lifetime of that ship, at 2010 fuel prices, that ship will save $250 million in fuel. We are beginning to look at making energy a determination in all our new contracts. How will the platform or the weapon system, what kind of energy will it use, and how will we get it? And for the person building it, for that company that's going to build it, how are you doing on energy usage? What is your footprint? Are you using alternative energy to build our weapon systems, to build our platforms, or not? Yeah. So I started this off by why the Navy? Well, the Navy has a history of leading in energy. In the 1850s, we went from sail to coal. In the early part of the 20th century, we went from coal to oil. In the 1950s, we pioneered the use of nuclear power for propulsion. And today, we're moving in to renewable, alternative energy. Now, at every one of those points I mentioned, at every single one of them, there were folks who said, you guys are nuts. You're trading one form of energy which is absolutely proven, like the wind, that we've been using for thousands of years, for one that's not proven. And, oh, by the way, it's going to be more expensive. You're going to have all those folks shoveling coal. We're going to have to build coaling stations all around the world. And those, usually, in the 1850s, the people saying that were admirals in the U.S. Navy. When we moved to oil in the early part of the 20th century, the same argument was made. We've got all these coalings, somehow too expensive, too exotic, we shouldn't be doing it, are going to be just as wrong as the folks were every single time in the past. If you you read stuff like the tipping point or chaos theory, the proposition is that systems tend to stay the way they're going pretty much status quo for a long, long time, and then they just suddenly change, almost overnight. We've seen it in our recent lifetimes with the internet, as the Vice President talked about with smartphones. Senator Reid said I was ambassador to Saudi Arabia. I left in 1994. Nobody had a cell phone then, and the internet was shaky at best. Remember those green screens that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't? When I came back 2 years later to the United States, everybody had a cell phone and everybody was connected to the internet, and that was a tipping point. And I think that we are getting close to a tipping point on energy, where one form of energy that we've been using for a long time will suddenly change. And I think the military can help lead the way to doing that. For 235 years, the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps led this country. They have been and are the most formidable expeditionary fighting force the world has ever known, and we've been that way for 235 years. By using alternative energy, by changing the way we use and produce energy, we're going to continue to be the most formidable expeditionary fighting force the world has ever known. And we're going to continue to do what Navy and Marine Corps have always done: innovate, adapt, and come out on the other side victorious. Thank you very much.